Auditing. I am that guy. I am going to talk about just auditing. Some things that people think about when they think of auditing, you think about security, so they think maybe that it's also related to encryption or passwords or things like that. This is just auditing, but I will touch on security a little bit. Really, when you're talking about encryption and auditing, you have to have your password stuff figured out before you can do any of those things. Otherwise, auditing doesn't matter. The database security discussion will be has been discussed before, and I will be doing this webcast for security again soon. So today, we're just making the assumption that you have already got all your passwords correct. The people that have those passwords have the correct permissions on them, and you trust everybody, and there's no big deal there. You don't store these passwords in plain text or like a OneNote or something like that. It's all secure. So once you have that, then you can do auditing. So let's take a look at that. When you're talking about auditing, we sometimes have to use analogies because it's really difficult to get some technical things across even when you are a techie. So I like to use the building analogy. So you have a building, you want people to come into the building and go out of the building. This is your database. The database is the building, and the data is inside the building. So who's coming and going from your database? Who's at the door right now? Who's walking around the street? And who's inside the database? Who's inside your building? You have some users that can come in through the front door. You have other users that can use the front and the back door. Some users can, parachute in and come in through that door up top there. Or if you're getting a delivery or a huge amount of data, there's somebody who has the keys to the garage door. And a few people have the keys to everything. So getting ahead of myself here because for some reason the slide kind of like thinks I want to go to the next one and kind of halfway gets there. Don't know why that is, but anyway, if you have everybody has their own key or key card, I guess. Let's just say they have key cards, and they have their permissions on there that says you can go in this door at 8 a.m. and you can only use it until 5 p.m. And a system administrator like myself could go in any door that they want at any time, and various things like that. So once you have that in the place, what are they doing while they're inside the building? And this is where we're going to start talking about more specific auditing style stuff. So here's a building. Let's just imagine this is just a generic building. I pulled this image off of the internet, and everybody has their key when they come in, so they have the ability to go into a specific office. The slide didn't go the direction I thought. So we have somebody who's up here in the corner office, and they have a key to get there. But they can also go to the conference room. They can go to the reception area, which I'm on top of like Godzilla. They can go to the bathroom if they're lucky. Then we have people coming in right here that they can come into the reception area and maybe even go to the conference room themselves. They'll get to use the restroom maybe if they're lucky. Then there's the IT guy. He gets to go to the server room, and he's probably the only person that can do that. And meetings, most people will be able to come to the conference room, guests, visitors, employees. Then you have your maintenance guy, he's the only person that can access the maintenance shed. And they both get to go to the bathroom. Everyone in this company gets to go to the bathroom, so it's a great place to work. And the IT guy gets to go to receptionist. You can see that people get to go everywhere, but what happens if a giant red X comes up over your conference room, or somebody just deletes the conference room? What do you do about that? I know the building analogy starts to kind of break down when you think about it in terms of auditing and security. But in this, let's say this is a weird building from another dimension where you have these controls over it that you normally wouldn't. And let's say somebody deletes the conference room, or you just walk over there and it's this empty space into darkness. How do you figure out who did that? Who had the authority to do it? Who was in there? And where is that information recorded? It may not have to be as drastic as deleting the conference room or destroying it. Maybe somebody changed the furniture or rearranged it, and no one noticed for a few days, and your favorite conference chair is gone. That kind of information could be critical to somebody. Now let's take a look at our conference room here. Do you notice anything different? Not our conference room, but our building layout. Do you notice anything different here? The really subtle difference is up in the top center, there's an extra conference chair that got there. Nobody knows how it got there, but suddenly it's there. And maybe you get to your office and the chair is gone. Who took that chair? But what if somebody deletes all the toilets in your company? Then this great bathroom going company doesn't have anywhere to go. Who took those toilets? Where are they going? Are they ever coming back? What happens if somebody fills up the corner office with water and turns it into a swimming pool? These are kind of things that, obviously it's analogy stretching a little bit, but you go into your data and there could be subtle differences or major differences like the pool and an extra chair that you don't know where they went. And the database records some things, but not everything. Your application, depending on what it is, may have some way of knowing who does what, but usually only a concept in the context of the application. And then the dreaded, everybody's always afraid of this, but when your conference room fills with badgers, what do you do then? How do you get the badgers out? Who put the badgers there? Does anybody remember what the conference room looked like before the badgers got there? And is it possible to even get that back? We don't know. So let's get to what is auditing. And from a technical perspective, it really has nothing to do with badgers unless you run a company that uses badgers for something. So we're recording and monitoring database actions. And this is like a success. Did you do it? Did it happen successfully? Did they log in successfully? Did they delete successfully? Or did they fail? Did somebody try to log in and fail? Usually login success and failure is monitored by default by databases, but failing to select from a table or failing to delete a record is not normally recorded. You can also look at specific users or their specific actions on specific objects. So if you're worried about, or maybe you have somebody who's in a critical field or a critical department, and you want to know, you have to know exactly what they're doing, you can put that on there. You can also see where they're logging in from and audit those attempts, every location that a login came from by their IP address. You also get the before and after picture of what happened. You see what the object looked like before maybe it's a delete on a table. You see the table, that record before it was deleted. You see what was issued to the table, to the database to delete that record, and then you see it afterwards. So now you can kind of step back. Not only you saw who did it, you see when they did it, what it looked like before they were there, what it looked like after, and what they did to change it. So that's really auditing, basic auditing. So why would you want to audit your database? Everybody's business depends on their data. When you don't, there was a statistic I used in previous webcasts that related to disaster recovery. If your company doesn't have a plan to recover from a disaster and you lose all your data, there's a 90% chance that you're going to go out of business. And this could be also for small amounts of data, or somebody doing something bad and you didn't know how to get it back, or you got audited and you couldn't prove to the auditor how that data was changed. So you want to be able to talk about your data, where it's going, where it's been, and figure out who did stuff if that's necessary. And users, like I say all the time, users mess things up. If it weren't for users, I wouldn't have a job. Users can get in and do all sorts of things through the application. They can do it directly. They can find somebody else's password. They can use maybe a third-party login from some kind of third-party software that accesses the database. So you don't know, you can't underestimate the number of ways that a user could mess stuff up and accidentally delete something and then just say, I didn't do it. That's why you would need auditing. Then there's hacking, espionage. Everybody's seen the ransomware attacks that have come out, some high-profile ones. It's impossible to stop a dedicated and determined attacker from getting into your stuff, but you can sure as heck prevent them sort of from getting in there and then find the traces and see what they did. There's also, you have a lot of super users. You could have super users in there that have too much power. They have maybe not too much, but they have a lot. And you want to see what they're doing. It's not because you don't trust them. It's just that they have so much ability that there could be some requirement for oversight. And then you have people like me, database administrators, who can go anywhere. Everywhere the data goes, the database administrator goes. So it's critical to monitor somebody with DBA level access because they can do anything. They can alter records. They can look at the audits. They can change the audit records and make it to where if they wanted to, they could change something, alter the records to make it look like somebody else did it, or that it didn't happen at all, and then move on. So if you have different levels of auditing in there, that works. When you get into that level of security where you need to know that detail, it's going to be a combination of security and encryption and things like that, but and also a lot of trust in your DBA too, because you have to be able to trust that they're not going to do that kind of thing to you. So here's your bad user. I have no idea what I'm doing. Get out of the way here. See, put that in there. That's funny. And there's your hacker, and there's me, the guy standing around with a laptop. I always stand around with a laptop in my hands. It makes me look like I'm doing something. Although since I work from home, I look kind of weird to the rest of the family. All right, so what are some best practices for auditing? You don't want to audit everything because that makes your data just grow a huge amount. Because every transaction, one insert to a table, if you audit that, you have to write down what it was before, what it is, what it will be, who did it, where did it come from, and then keep that for an extended period of time. And then everything else that happened to that table and that data. And as you can imagine, if you audited every transaction or everything that happened to every object, you would soon have an audit database much larger than your business data. So don't do that. You want to first look at it. What are you required to audit? Do you have any kind of compliance requirements? The GDPR requirements that have come out, that's a big deal these days. It has some very specific requirements. 21 CFR Part 11, which everybody who's in JD Edwards probably knows about. That's for sensitive data. There could be industry requirements for what you do specifically. Like I know in the aviation industry, I used to work for an aircraft company, and we had to keep copies of every iteration of every drawing for every part on the airplane for like 7 years, so that the FAA could at any time come and look at those things. So that may not necessarily be, it's not going to be applicable to everybody, but it is to your industry. And then the corporate things too. There could be specific things for the corporation that they want to see, that they need to have, and that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. So you start there with your auditing. That's what you want to look at. Then you pick the minimum amount to audit, because not every table or not every object has something in it that needs to be audited. You don't need to audit, say, when something goes from one step to another, but you would want to audit somebody changing their social security number or their salary, for example. And that's when we get into what is the highest consideration you want to have for your stuff is critical data like salary, like private information, social security numbers, and then your super user and administrative access, the people who have the ability to do the most damage, whether you trust them or not. You need to audit that, because I guarantee you in other audits, like SOX audits and things like that, they're going to want to see that kind of access that has happened on your system. And then in there also is the separation of duties. If you're into if you have to deal with nationally required auditing like Sarbanes-Oxley, there's going to be a separation of duties. For example, a database administrator must administer the database. They do table changes, they do performance stuff and new databases and whatnot, and a developer wouldn't do that. A developer does development, and an applications person accesses the database through the application. Security people, they define and implement the security, and so on and so forth. Now, not all companies have the ability to separate DBAs from server people, from network people and all that, but that is a concern, is you don't want to give somebody a huge amount of access just because there's only 3 people in your company. Now, the network guy doesn't need DBA access. It's the DBA that does that. And whenever you get audited, that's one of the first things they're going to look at is what are your separation of duties? Are you letting a developer promote projects into production? Are you letting a CNC develop objects? Are you letting a CNC generate tables or do things on the database that would normally be for a database administrator? That will be something that you'll get dinged for, and it's kind of complicated by some software like JD Edwards allows you to do database operations through the application, and that's where you get to just because you can do a thing doesn't mean it's a good idea to do it. always remember your separation of duties, because that is going to end up being one of the things you're going to have to audit one day. So then, what specifically should I audit? So new databases always have default settings. If you are in an organization that creates new databases often or ever, you want to have a basic set of auditing put in that will keep track of these default settings, default passwords, default users, and find out when somebody's trying to use it, and also keep a record of, if people miss things. I know they're going to forget that this schema password is always the same as the username by default, but you want to have an audit in there to kind of catch that. And just as an aside, when you get a new database or get a new software, all of those default users and passwords, everybody knows those. So if you haven't changed your JDE password from JDE, that's a huge security risk. If your schema names passwords are the same as the schemas, huge security risk. Those should all be changed. As soon as you get done with this webcast, go change all that stuff, because everybody knows it. Anybody who has done JD Edwards, anybody who's done any kind of database or software, there are thousands, millions of people out there who know those credentials. So that's number one breaker of audits and encryption. But you always want to, next thing is you always want to audit user logins, log in, log out, success and failure. Fortunately, that is done by default on pretty much every database. And even JD Edwards has log in, log out records for individual users. Now, the problem with JD Edwards and applications like it is they funnel all their application traffic through one database user. So if you're auditing database logins, then you're just going to see millions of logins to JDE. That's not very helpful. And I could go into another long side topic about making your database a little bit more secure and helping with troubleshooting and whatnot by creating multiple system users that are for departments, maybe putting them on roles so that if something happens with one department, it's not mixed in with everybody else's stuff. And that's going to be good for auditing as well. Database administrators, like I said before, they have some magical powers. They can alter audit records. They can change your salaries, whatever they want to do. They have full access to everything. And then there are some critical database objects that have to be controlled and audited. On the Oracle database, there's a thing called a control file, that if that control file is modified or deleted, then your database just halts. There's also settings that can halt your database very quickly. If you reduce the amount of space for, say, your archive logs, the database will stop. On a SQL Server, there's other things that you can change as well. If you change owner of a schema, then suddenly people won't be able to log in. So these changes to the lower level stuff that's going on behind the scenes that even a database administrator could do, having that audit out there will help you not only figure out who did it, but quickly determine what the problem was. We had an example just a few weeks ago where somebody went in and changed the schema owner on a SQL Server on one of the schemas inside a database, and we didn't quite know how it happened or what precipitated that. But with auditing, you can tell all of that information. You just go right into the audit log. What happened? Show me, and now you know. And then you don't have to hunt it down and scratch your head about why can I suddenly not log in? Nobody was supposed to be on here. Back again to sensitive data, it's always got to be protected. You have to know who's touching it. If you don't know, if you have social security numbers and somebody just does a select statement on it, and the social security number comes up, if that's an untrustworthy person, they can use that to change their identity or steal stuff or whatever. I talked about in critical database objects a little bit about the database configuration. But there's also settings inside the database that aren't related to a specific object, like memory settings and how fast the redo logs roll over on a database. If you change those can cause huge performance problems if you don't know what you're doing. So those are good to keep a record of that. And any kind of data movement. In many databases, when you move data from one instance to another or one database to another, depending on what flavor of database you have, that changes the security of those objects to whatever the destination is, or it can. Not always, but it can. And while that data is in flight to the other side, the data could be compromised. And because of the differences, even in auditing between two different databases, you might lose an auditing capability moving production data to development. And then all of a sudden, all of that great auditing you had in production is gone in development, but you forgot to get rid of everybody's salary. So now, you see where I'm going with that. So audit all those things at every level, no matter where that could be going. You may want people to see it, but you don't want everybody to see it, and maybe you just need to see who's looking at it. So there's just a lot of components to your data, and any part of these could be cause for a data breach or a theft or just a simple mistake. So auditing these key things like I'm showing here is going to be what you need to start with for sure. All right. Whoa, look at all those people. These are all the people in your company. This is generally what I do when I'm building a presentation is I'll go grab graphics from all over to build my thing, and I'll put it into a slide that I typically remove before a webcast. So I've just given you a secret to how to do webcasts as well. 2 for 1 on this one today. All right, so you probably want some details about what kind of auditing functions there are. What can you do on a database? Databases have a lot of built-in auditing functions. In fact, every flavor has a certain level of auditing that they do. Like I said, they all audit logins and logouts. There's also the capability of adding additional auditing to the database. Some databases require you to be on a certain version, like Enterprise Edition for fine-grained auditing. Oracle, you may have to buy additional licensing for different kinds of auditing. That's okay. There's a lot of manual ways to get into auditing too. You can do database level traces. These traces can track a lot of things. Basically, you're turning on debug logging for your database, and it records everything. And it gives you a lot of data. It comes with a database, but it can generate a lot of data, and you have to parse through it and figure this out on your own. What was the before and after and whatnot. Still, it's there. It's free, and you can do it for short periods of time. If you don't have auditing in, you're trying to trace something that's going on right now, or you know when it's going on, put the trace out there, let the trace do it, and then find it later. And then maybe you can see what you need to audit based on that data. There's also temporal data, basically data in different points of time. Oracle has always had the ability to query things in the past using the undo table space. The default setting for undo in Oracle is 900 seconds, which is 15 minutes, not very much time to look at stuff in the past. You can set your undo table space to be to hold a week's worth of data if you had enough room in your database. But using standard edition, you can do a query of a table as it existed in the past to see what that data looked like. And that's kind of a form of auditing because the undo table space does record before and after information about every transaction. So if you don't have the money for a super auditing tool, you don't want to go to Enterprise Edition, just explode on Oracle, explode your undo table space to as big as you can, and boom, you got auditing. At least you know what the before and after was. If you don't know specifically who did it, you do know what happened. On SQL Server, it's a little bit different. Temporal tables were not introduced until SQL 2016, and you have to specify a specific table to do that. There's also transaction logs. Every database creates a transaction log. Every transaction is recorded. It's similar to the undo table space, except these logs are kept and then backed up and sent, and they're used to restore the database to a point in time. You can read transaction logs, but it requires special tools. There's a lot of overhead for it, and it's not designed to be read. You can still reconstruct things that happened on a database using your transaction logs, or on Oracle, the archive logs and redo logs. But that's a really difficult way to do it. And as we get lower and get into more and more difficult ways, you could do network sniffing. It will, you can view everything that goes everywhere and grab every packet and see where it came from and where it went. Not all SQL goes over the network, so if somebody logs directly onto their database and runs commands, that won't capture any of those. And you can add audit columns to tables. In JD Edwards, many tables have what they call audit columns, which records the JDE user, date, and time of the transaction. That's not always helpful because a lot of these tables only record the last person to touch that row. So if somebody's changing an F0911 transaction, changing a detail in there, it puts their username and their workstation, date and time in there. But if someone goes in and changes something else on that row, it updates that column to who they were. So you do get sort of some auditing. There's a few tables that do keep a history of stuff in there. I don't have a list of those on me right now. And a lot of applications do have these audit columns that may be able to help you out. And that kind of goes to the application level auditing. They may have something more than audit columns. For example, JDE has 21 CFR Part 11 auditing. And what that does is it replicates database auditing, essentially. You can set up 21 CFR Part 11 auditing on a database just like it is in JD Edwards. The thing about JD Edwards is that you can do it all within the tool. And strangely enough, it can record things that happen done directly on the database to an audited table. Drawbacks to application level auditing is they don't usually survive refreshes or transplants to other databases. For example, JD Edwards auditing has to be turned off, and all the audit tables that were used before are no longer being used. Those have to be archived. So when you turn it back on, you turn it off, do your export, turn it back on, and you restart auditing, and you can go from there. If you were to do it on a database, that stuff would be more consistent. And then when you move that data to another environment, if you don't have it audited there, then you're taking your production data, which you needed to know everything that happened to it, and putting it somewhere into a playground where nobody's held accountable. So be careful with that. Even lower down, I don't know anybody's ever done this, but you can actually go to every single block that goes into that database and tap those and look in and see what there is. That's super complicated. I don't know why anyone would do that unless they just wanted to have fun with it, but there it is anyway. It's like a brain tap. It can record everything that's going on, but it kind of interferes with the operation of the database, and it's prone to bugs, and it could cause performance issues. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some specific stuff. Primarily, the audience for these webcasts are people on Oracle or SQL Server, so I'm going to talk about those. There are functions and things for iSeries, which if you want to shoot me an email afterwards, I can tell you about iSeries, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and anything that you want. I can tell you how to audit that. But we're just going to talk about Oracle and SQL Server. Fortunately, most databases audit things the same way, just in slightly different flavors. So here in Oracle database 12c, it's a huge new way to audit, which is really cool. Before, in previous versions, you had separate audit trails that you would have to pull together into something to make a report. Well, now with unified auditing, they have a whole bunch of new data dictionary views, which are lower level metadata like views that collect things from all over the database and put them into one view. So you can query that instead of 27 things. Anyway, now with the unified auditing, it brings all of that auditing in these separate parts together into one view, which you can write really cool reports on. They can do conditional auditing now, and it makes it faster for finding the things that you need to know about the auditing. And there's a couple other things that kind of go with Oracle, which are not in the scope of this webcast, but there's Audit Vault and the Database Firewall, which do their analysis. The Database Firewall can go all the way down to the layer 7 analysis of your SQL statements. So it's pretty in-depth stuff. Now, this is going to require probably Oracle Enterprise Edition. The more detailed you want to get, the more money you got to spend. So let's take a look now at how we do it in SQL Server. Now, SQL Server overall uses extended events to do its auditing. And here's in the event viewer, there's an example, and it's kind of blurry. Sorry about that. But it's got you just go into your event viewer in security, and if you've ever gone into the event viewer and clicked on security, you will see a million zillion things in there that are related to security. Every login, every logout, over and over and over and over and over. Fortunately, with the filters, you can filter those out and get something else. You can also create your own event viewer with built-in filters that don't pull this information. And if you have multiple servers, you can create a multi-server event viewer custom for yourself, which I do a lot if I'm doing an analysis of a client. I'll open up the management console and create an event viewer that collects data from everybody and just puts it all in the event viewer. Or I also have a script that does that too. But anyways, your audit we'll just go into your event viewer. And so the extended events, those are built into the SQL code. It comes with it. You have to have higher versions for fine-grained auditing, just like Oracle. So when you configure SQL Server auditing, it's point and click. You create a server level specification, and then you create a server level audit specification, and then a database audit specification where you can audit everything: inserts, updates, deletes, table operations, changing owners, deleting things, adding things, all that stuff. Now, SQL Server also has a few other ways to audit. There's C2 auditing, which is an all or nothing, very easy to set up, but you turn on C2 auditing, it audits absolutely everything right off the bat. You don't have to configure anything, it just does it. There's also a common compliance criteria, which is created by the EU. It has a lot of overhead, but it works really well for the European Union and meets their requirements. Not too many people doing that, although the C2 and common compliance, you don't need any extended licensing for that. So let me show you. I'm actually going to show you what this looks like. Let me switch to, I always try to have a hands-on component to my webcast, so I'm going to go to our lab and show you. So this is one of our many JDE labs here, and this, it's funny, I'm clicking on the broadcast screen and not the actual screen. So here's our lab, and there's really not too much on it, but if you want to create I'll just collapse all these so you can see it. So you log into your SQL Server, open up security, and you see here server audit specifications. So you right click and do new server audit specification. You can name this anything you want. I'm going to name it Bill's Audit. I don't know if I can use apostrophe, but I'm going to just say Bill Audit. And it's, oh, whoops, I got ahead of ourselves. I have to create the new audit. You have to create the audit first, which is the overarching thing that does the auditing. So let's call this Bill Audit. And it's going to, if the audit log fails, it's going to continue. You can make it shut down the server if this is mission critical. I'm going to put it to a file on the C drive in a directory I created called MSSQL. You want to change your maximum file size to something reasonable, because if your auditing gets to a terabyte, there's probably not any application that's going to be able to open that. Make them 10 megs or something small that you can open it up with TextPad or Notepad++. If you need to add some filters, that's fine. You can get into that on your own. So we'll also make sure that we have the maximum rollover files are unlimited, because you don't want to miss anything. And then click OK. So that starts it, and it starts the audit in a disabled state, which is normal. It's fine. Then you go do your new server audit specification. So let's take a look at that. This is going to be server level auditing. I'm going to call this Bill Server Audit. And we are going to use the audit that we just created, which is called Bill Audit. And the actions we're going to be able to audit are right here. I could do something like anytime somebody changes. So I told you about the schema ownership change. We can add the schema ownership change group. And we can just click OK here if we want, but you can add in some more details about it. I'm just going to click OK. So now we have a server audit. Now there can only be one audit specification per server. So if you want to audit more things, you have to go in and add those other things. So if I want to add everything to do with schema, I'm going to do schema object change group, ownership, we already did that one, permission change, etc. So you put all your actions in there, and depending on the audit type, you may need to put in the object class, the specific schema and name, and a user. So anyways, we'll click OK there. Now we have the server audit. Once you have these down, they both have a red X. We need to enable the audit, and this lets it start collecting information from the server and database audit. And we're going to enable this server audit specification. Very easy. And now we can go into our databases and create a database audit specification. So let's go into JDE development, just because we can. You go into security, and the very bottom it says database audit specification. Right click, click new, and bill JDE dev audit. And this is going to use the audit that we created, this is the instance level audit. And here are the actions that you can take. You can, let's see, scroll down. So we can do delete and insert and update and so on and so forth. This can be for, let me get out of the way here. Yeah, so there's your OK button. And the object class could be the entire data, anything on the database. You can do specific objects, specific schemas. So I'm going to do database on all these. And do I get my OK button back? Not yet. And this is where you can pick your, so this database level, you pick your object, which is going to be JDE development. I'm going to copy that so I don't have to do it again. This is just like every other Windows-based operation where you want to find a user or whatever. You just go in and put the that object in there. So we got each one of them say JDE development, and I guess I could have just moved this out of the way. And then you pick a principal for these objects, and you can pick multiples if it comes back. So I guess anyway, because I wanted to show you Oracle too, you go in and pick your objects, you pick the users, you can be very specific or very general and select certain things. And you can use this in combination with C2 auditing and the default auditing and creating your own trace. And even third-party software that does this, you can put this all together. If you have the disk space to do this, you can certainly audit everything that you could ever possibly want. Oh, here we go. So we can do, we can audit everybody who's a DB owner, right? If we want to. And I'm not going to go through all this because, well, it's just taking so long. Keep that in there and click OK. Now that's going to fail because this version of SQL Server doesn't have the permission to do that level of auditing. But if you did have it, it would create it, and then you could go in and mess around, and this stuff would pile up in the event log. So let's jump over to SQL Developer real quick. So I can show you that real quick before we run out of time. Here's SQL Developer is what I always recommend for people to use. I know I personally use Toad, which is costs like a ton of money, but this is free. You can just download it free from Oracle. You can do almost anything you want. You can manage the database from here, and it's a little bit more user-friendly than the command line. So let's go to when you open up SQL Developer, the first thing that you're going to have in the side when you log into any system is your database and all these things. And here's a quick tip: if you use SQL Developer and you can't find your tables, like you want to see the F0901, but you open up tables and it's not there, that's because the SQL Developer displays tables by owner. So you want to close that and go down to other users, open that up, then you scroll to the environment that you're looking for, and we'll do test DTA, open up tables there, and then you can see all the tables owned by test DTA. Kind of sort of similar to SQL Server. They use the concept of databases, and Oracle uses schemas more. So you can see now we have our test DTA tables down there. But in order to do auditing, you have to have the DBA window. And that is, you want to do view, DBA, I already have it up. The DBA window is a separate log, it logs in, and then this is where you do your database administration. You come down to security, and it has audit settings and the profiles, roles, users, and whatnot that you can click into. But if you go to audit settings, then you can create a new audit, which is do edit audit privileges, objects, or statements. So we can go edit the object privileges. So this is for object type first, you pick, let's do table, and we can do schema. We're going to pick test DTA. So you imagine this is production. Then I can find like F0101 bill here, success or failure on a session. So this is going to be an audit for anybody who does any select, insert, update, delete to bills table. And you want to see the SQL for it. It should put it there, but it did not. So I'm going to apply this. And so now I have this audit in there. when you're in this window, you can look at the other information about your database, whatever's being audited, the failed logins, privileges, objects, everything like that. It's going to be listed in here. I haven't done anything yet, so there's not anything there, and I'm actually kind of out of time. But if I were to go in and audit, or go in and change that table of mine, it would show a record for who did it and why they did it, or not why, who did it, how they did it, and the before and after. Oh, and I forgot to mention one benefit of auditing for you who are DBAs. Auditing is great for all those times when somebody does something and they blame the DBAs, which is really easy to blame, and you know, usually it's our fault, but not always. So if you put auditing on to just basic auditing that's not really heavy, DBA can kind of protect themselves when somebody comes and says, well, he messed something up, or that didn't work, or whatever. You can go through your audit log and say, nope, this person logged in and did this thing, and that's why it's like this. It's not because I configured it wrong. So, you know, from pure selfish protection, DBA should use auditing for this kind of stuff. All right, now at that, we're going to go to the blank screen where I'm sitting in the darkness, my old friend, and I'm going to turn this back over to Brooke.
Awesome, thank you so much. Let me know when you can see my screen, Bill.
I see it.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right, so awesome, thank you for your presentation, Bill. I just want to cover a few follow-up items before we get into our question and answer section of our webcast. And our webcast today is part of our free ongoing educational webcast series for JD Edwards. And our upcoming webcasts are currently listed on the screen. And also we have a website called erptalk.com, which is a problem-solving forum where you can get your questions answered for JD Edwards and other enterprise applications as well. And be sure that you stay connected with us on social media, just so to keep up with all of our events and industry insights and a lot more. We also have all of our handles currently listed on the screen. And we provide extensive free educational resources for the JD Edwards community, including our weekly webcasts, our monthly newsletter called the GSI Insider, and our online resource center where you can access our on-demand webcasts, white papers, and a lot of other great content as well. And we also offer on-site and virtual workshops. And if you'd like to sign up for any of our weekly email reminders for upcoming webcasts or a monthly newsletter, or just to create an account for a resource center, you can go to getgsi.com, go to resources and events on the main menu, and then select JD Edwards on the right. All right. All right, Bill, I see the only question that we've got here today is if this was going to be available afterwards. And it will. We will also send you a link to our resource center where you can access this recording. And then also you'll have a copy of the presentation as well. And let me make sure there are no other questions that popped up.
I think I see a couple questions in there.
Oh, we did. Yep. Okay. Sorry, Claudia. Okay. So, Bill, we have a question from Claudia here, and she said, what would be the easiest way to turn on audit on the F0011 batch table 21 audit?
Yeah, so it looks like they're needing to see who's posting a batch and when and where, and the table doesn't record that. That's correct. You can use 21 CFR Part 11. The benefit to that would be that you control it entirely from within JD Edwards, and it creates the audit tables and manages it all within the application. You can also do that with database auditing, which would be controlled from the database level. It would probably be easier to migrate between environments, but definitely it's really easy to do it with the 21 CFR application.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. And we actually have another question that came in, and it's from Mark. And Mark said, is there a way to audit when JDE tables are generated or regenerated via database tables?
So yeah, if you're using the JDE application and you have the right tools release, um, you know, well, inside OMW logging, you can see every action that's conducted from within OMW. So if they click generate table, that's going to be assigned to the user who was in, and so that's kind of audited by JDE right now. On the database, you can audit when tables are dropped, but there's a little bit of a complication with database tables being dropped, especially through the application, because when you use OMW to drop a table, or to generate a table, it drops the table and all indexes, and then recreates it with the same exact name and so forth on over top of it. So if you are worried about tables being dropped via OMW generation, then make sure if you're on Oracle, you have a really good solution, which is to make sure that your recycle bin is turned on, and that keeps track of drop tables. Then if somebody accidentally generates a table, you will see who did it inside the JD application, but you won't be able to bring it back. But with the Oracle Recycle Bin, you can bring it back through a little bit of magic. I actually have a webcast on how to do this in the GSI archives. One of the disaster recovery, how to recover from small mistakes webcast has that in there. So auditing that, like I said, is done through the OMW application, the OMW logging. What I recommend to people is when they want to audit things happening in OMW is, number one, disable the JDE user. Don't let anybody log in with that user. Don't allow people to know any of the schema users, and set up your database and application security such that they have to use their own username and password to generate the tables. So there's a few things. You might want to look into a combination of a security audit from Brian Connor, who is our security stuff, and then I do specifically database audits.
Awesome. And just a follow-up, Mark asked another question, and he said, post-regeneration grants to tables are made to public. Is there any option to make this process grant to a custom role?
So prior to 9.2, tools release 9.2.15, anyways, 9.2, you cannot do that. You have to go in after each generation and do the public regrant, take it from public, grant it to others. So best way I've done that with is just to create a script that automatically runs, I don't know, every day, every other day, every month, or whatever, or just make it part of the development process to remove those grants. Now in 9.2, there is an application inside ADE called Data Source Security, which, if set up correctly, will be able to grant permissions to custom roles or to more appropriate roles. Let's put it that way. So when you generate a table, it'll, instead of going to public, it'll go where you want. But unfortunately, everything before 9.2, there's no way to prevent it from going to public.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. And
I wanted to also touch on one of the other questions about cloud support. Brooke did answer that. We do support Oracle Cloud on the database side, and obviously everywhere else with JDE. We also support Azure and AWS. So if you need any specific questions related to auditing or security or whatever, or anything related to database on any cloud platform, definitely reach out. We can help you. In fact, I have many webcasts that relate to cloud, setting up in the cloud, multi-cloud, backing up to the cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So go through our YouTube channel and check out the ones that I've done for databases.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for your questions, and Bill for your presentation and for answering all the questions as well. As a follow-up from today's webcast, we ask that you complete a short 1-minute survey when you exit, and you will be receiving an email with a link to our resource center. As I said before, on our website where you can access today's recording as well as the presentation. And after today's webcast, we will do a drawing for the $25 Amazon gift card, and anyone that attended the entire webcast is eligible, and we will notify the winner. And if you have any follow-up questions, as Bill said before, please feel free to reach out to us and we can definitely help you. And Bill, Mark said thanks as well as a follow-up. And
Welcome.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody again, and Bill, for your presentation. And we hope that you guys have a great day.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye. Thanks.